Previously on the Project Umbrella podcast.
In fact, I'm only allowed to do this podcast because the missus is away in Amsterdam on work.
Do you like Resident Evil? Do you have breasts?
Well, it'll just be questions about, about your physical appearance, what size breasts you have. These will be coming from Welsh, by the way, not me.
Oh, he asked me to post a picture of my ass. That's what part of it.
Whoa, where is this?
Where is this?
The picture of the ass or the comment about the ass?
No, the fucking comment. It seems to be quite an ass. Could you post a picture?
Smooth.
Project Umbrella.
Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Project Umbrella podcast, dissecting the truth from Lisa Trevor's autopsy and sending Mr. Spencer to Rockford Island for a failed drugs test. I'm Nick, better known as Neptune, and joining me today is the Batman.
Hello.
George Trevor.
Good evening.
Newsbot.
Hello.
And our very special guest for this evening, it's Romby.
Founder of Resident Evil A New Blood, and co-founder of Resident Evil Fan. With over 1,700 posts on the Horror is Alive, with only 10 posts on the Project Umbrella forums. Well known and popular Biohazard fan. One of the original Resident Evil legends and icon of the community. From New Zealand, it's Romby!
Hello.
Excellent. Right, so we've got an action-packed podcast today. Coming up on today's show, we're going to be looking at all the latest news. Not a lot's actually happened since the last podcast, but we'll still have an in-depth discussion on that. We've also got a bit of site news, which we were keen to share with all our listeners. We've got a sub-discussion on Mahara Desire from George. Have we?
You say sub-discussion, just kind of moaning it's fucking boring. I've done most of it.
Okay, we'll get there.
We'll get into that. Because I've got something I want to say about that.
Okay, cool. Then our main discussion of the podcast is Biohazard Remake, Resident Evil Remake, whatever you want to call it. It's the remake of the classic game, and we're going to be looking at that in a lot of detail. And of course, we're ending with Neptune and Newsy's Biohazard quiz. So first, I'd like to say welcome, Romby.
Oh, shit. I've just realised that if Mr. Spencer isn't here, does that mean he's going to get another expert answering his questions?
Potentially.
Oh, shit.
Am I standing in for him?
No.
I don't know if I'm really that much of an expert. You might be alright.
Anyway, welcome, Romby. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
No problem.
And before we crack on with the news, I just take this opportunity to say, as I said, hello, welcome. It's not often we get family website members on the podcast, so I just want a quick discussion about what you've been doing with Resident Evil Fan, how you got into it, and I think you were New Blood at the beginning, weren't you?
Yeah, well, before I even started New Blood, I started just doing bits and pieces for different people's websites, and eventually spun it off into what I considered then a website I called The New Blood, because it was related to the new games at the time. So it was Resident Evil 3, Code Veronica, 0. So this was around mid-99. And after that, it just kind of took off, and it grew too large, and eventually the weight of running it was problematic. So I merged it with Resident Evil Fan, and ran it pretty successfully for several years. But I have to admit, since about 2008, it's probably tailed off, and it's mostly an archive now.
But it's back now, isn't it, RE Fan? Is it run by Project Omega?
Yeah, he's taken it over, and there's some discussions about he's fixed up things that were missing, and got the captionless section running again, which is great. And the forums are still running, and there's movement on refreshing this entire website as well.
Okay. Now, I don't speak for everyone else, but I speak for me, saying A New Blood was actually very much my first Resident Evil website that I came across.
I was going to say me too.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really know the personalities involved. I didn't realise, Ron B. I wanted to thank you as well. Because I noticed, I think it was around the time of Resident Evil 5 that things over there kind of slowed down a lot. And I was always quite curious to find out why and to thank the people involved. Because, it was the first website I came across.
The reason why it kind of slowed down is I guess I've been moving around the country and my work and so forth. I just didn't have the hours to put into it. And to be quite honest, there was a little bit of a lack of passion in the later franchise than there was perhaps with the earlier games.
Oh, okay. Well, I said I don't know about everyone else, but for me, the actual A New Blood, not RE Fan A New Blood, but A New Blood, when it was just that was my first experience. And what caught my eye was the fact that I think at the time you're one of the only websites that really dealt with Gun Survivor more than anyone else. It was. I got it for Christmas, and that was just right at the beginning of my involvement in RE, and I thought I'd Google it, Gun Survivor Resident Evil, and you were top of the Google. And it was that really got me into it, and so there we go.
I made the mistake of actually writing a text FAQ for Survivor back in the day.
Oh, really?
I think it's still on Game Facts.
Brilliant. But I remember it being a wicked site, New Blood, and then obviously then it merged. And...
Can I just ask, Nick, because you purchased Survivor, you say, when it came out, on its release, or around about that time?
Yeah, I can't remember when I think it might have come out November.
It really gets a hard time, and quite often people, kind of forget what I think is one of the best stories in a Resident Evil game. When it actually came out, because I didn't play it until years later, how did the graphics stand up at that point?
I was only a kid, right? And I compared it to, they are better than the in-game, not cinematics, but in-game text that happened between characters, not a video or a cinematic. I found the graphics were better than that, but not as good as a cinematic. So it was kind of like a halfway house. I didn't think they were great, but my mum bought it for me for Christmas, and I got it with the gun. And the gun was swiftly returned after I found it unplayable. But yeah, so it was all right. I mean, it didn't get particularly. I think the best score it got at the time was a 7.
When it first appeared at the Tokyo Game Show in '99, even the press weren't. They were like, "Oh wow, amazing!" It was announced without any fanfare, pretty much, and it didn't really get great comments right from the start. There was a lot of hope for improvements by the time it released, but it was such a rushed product. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I think most of it was outsourced aside from the story as well, and it reuses elements from Resident Evil 2.
Yes, that's quite notable, especially with the BOWs. So how did the merger with RE Fan come about? Because is that Marco? Not Marco. That's totally RE.
It was Rudy. Yeah, it was pretty difficult. I'd managed to get myself affiliated with an actual gaming network around 2000. It was actually paying the bills as far as advertising, because I was getting revenue from advertising. This is before when you used to be able to actually make money off the internet. And so it paid for the server, and it paid for the domain name, and it paid for itself, and I got a little bit of money on top, which was kind of nice at the time. But eventually the bubble burst, and so no one could really make any money off advertising, because this is when people just got money for people viewing a banner ad, not even clicking on it. Nobody made any sense that this wouldn't work. And so I eventually was like, I'm going to not be able to be hosted. And I jumped around a couple of networks, but unfortunately, because the site was really popular in its day, and of course with the cost of bandwidth going up because no one could afford it with no money coming in, I couldn't really host it anywhere. And eventually, even one of my friends had hosted it for about a year, and it was killing his site because it was just eating away like 90% of his bandwidth. And so it got to the point where I just had to either close it or merge it if I could, and the offer came up to merge it with Resident Evil Fan, and that's how it happened. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah. At the time, I was also running a link list. I don't know if you guys ever saw it as well. It was called RE Sites, and it used to be a big hub of the community. And unfortunately, that was part of the casualties as well, because I ran that still for about another 6 months after we merged with Resident Evil Fan. But it just I couldn't keep operating because of the same reason. It just wasn't a possibility.
My website was an RE Sites, I think, or something like it. I had my own GeoCities Resident Evil website, and I think I got it on that years ago. It was terrible.
I used to have so many people like submitting all the time, and they'd get quite if they didn't get on, they'd get quite upset. But I had a great rapport with just about all the webmasters back then too, which is good. I talked to them quite regularly, and
because that was the time of like Resident Evil All-Stars.de and things like that.
Yeah, and Biohazard Extreme, and Totally Resident Evil, and everything about Resident Evil, and all these websites. There's so many of them, and there's hardly any left.
Evil Unleashed, that was quite good.
Evil Unleashed, the Horror is Live still around, obviously. There was always RE Horror and plenty more. It's funny too because there was a website that's using that. The Capcom's just obviously announced that ResidentEvil.net thing, but that used to be a website as well. It used to be run by a guy in the UK about a decade ago. So it's quite funny to see that address coming back up again.
Well, thank you very much. That was very, very interesting. Interesting you should mention that domain name because that's part of the news. So let's crack on with the news. First bit of news is Resident Evil 6 related, and it comes with the news for UK people, UK buyers, that the No Hope edition of Resident Evil 6 is coming to the UK. This is yet another version to choose from, but thankfully it's not as expensive as the Steelbook Super Ultimate Deluxe Alpha Turbo one that we spoke about last week. This is the No Hope Left edition, comes with a Steelbook copy of the game, a Tool Oaks No Hope Left number plate, a Zombie Bite hoodie, and a USB bullet key pen hard drive thingy-majob.
No concept art book. No art book with that one.
Don't think so, no. This is an exclusive set, and it's currently going to be priced at about 90 quid.
You might as well get the other set, which is only sort of an extra 30 odd quid.
Yeah.
My understanding is that hoodie is actually from another place, and they've just branded it with the RE6 logo, so you can actually just buy that hoodie anyway.
That sounds like Capcom.
I saw it somewhere. I don't remember where, and they said they had the link. But yeah, that Zombie Bite hoodie's been made before. We've got a similar set. It's called, it was for Australia and New Zealand, but it's not with the hoodie or the license plate. But there's a carrier bag, I think. So that's the same thing, but it's called the same thing. No Hope Left edition or something like that.
I'm still unsure. I don't usually fall for these and get all the expensive deluxe version. I usually get like the maybe limited edition one, like for the RE5, that comes with like the making of DVD or something. I don't usually spend all that money on a game. I think it's quite expensive for. I don't know. I'm not really a collector of that kind of thing. But I know it appeals to a lot of people out there, and fair play. Other news, also Biohazard 6, and it's the announcement, as you just said, Rob, of the ResidentEvil.net username coming back. And this is to be an online portal for Resident Evil 6, where players can track their progress and share their achievements with other gamers, trophies and mercenary high scores and things like that. And obviously there'll be some downloadable content, and people will be able to compare and contrast, get leaderboards going on. It's a free service via PC and available when the game comes out. So we'll share information and stats on weapon usage, enemy killed, friends' gameplay progress, as I said, mercenary high scores, real-time gameplay progress. And friends can also join up unlocking new in-game material like costumes just by beating set objective like 10,000 kills in one weekend. Now, this is a new thing for Capcom. They've never really done anything quite like this. And what does everyone think about it? Anyone interested in that kind of thing?
I've used the Rockstar's social club, and I kind of used it more for the extras rather than like it has stat tracking for like you want to unlock everything, and that's perhaps a bit more interesting to me. I'm not so interested in the multiplayer aspect, but it probably serves a good purpose, especially for people who like those stat tracking services. It's pretty big with hooters these days, especially people who play Call of Duty. So again, it's another angle that Capcom's kind of trying to put on that path, I guess. Yeah,
I was going to say it certainly appeals more to the Call of Duty gamers than necessarily the original hardcore Resident Evil fans. But it's not a hindrance to it. You can get Resident Evil points on the website, and that can be used and spent to unlock other things in your own game, costumes and things like that. It certainly adds a bit more replayability to the game and should keep you coming back for more and more. Perhaps a sign that Resident Evil 7's a long way off. But,
I just wanted to know how long it'll be before some, probably hours, if not days, before it's obviously someone illegally breaks something on the game, or they've got millions of points more than anyone else, because that always happens. They just want to be at the top of any leaderboard they can.
George, you be interested in doing that kind of thing?
I mean, not really. It was quite useful. I mean, if you're into racing simulators, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit has something similar. I don't know. I mean, it's all quite a lot to take in, isn't it? I'm just kind of trying to get my head around, completing all three, and then an Ada's story, and then the prequel, which, I'm not quite sure. Is this going to be a prequel to Resident Evil 7? Is it a prequel to Resident Evil 6? So there's quite a lot to take in. I mean, it might be good. If it adds another social dimension to it, then why not?
I mean, it's certainly confirming its position as the biggest Resident Evil game that's ever been made. It's going to be absolutely massive.
Oh, it's huge. It's absolutely huge.
Because I'm not so sure if the decision whether to, even if there is going to be a Resident Evil 7, has been taken yet, and could, obviously have a lot to do with how, such a mammoth project takes off, and, whether it inspires the imaginations, of the players.
I imagine there will be a 7 at some point. I'm surprised they haven't maybe like tried to expand on Code Veronica and do like a Code Veronica 2 or something like that. Trying to make it almost like a new franchise out of this, or a new IP, or expand upon an existing IP. We've had obviously the Chronicle series and the Outbreak and the Survivor series. I thought they might have done a bit more with Code Veronica.
Maybe Dead Aim 2 next time.
Don't
get me started. No, that would be good.
That would be awesome, wouldn't it? Whilst we're here, I read somewhere on the site about this DSO organisation, and there was the link back to the FBC with Sherry, but was that's an in-game file?
Oh, no, it says Sherry's a member of another organisation, and then it mentions the FBC later, as in saying that they're unrelated. That's all, really.
Right, okay.
It was just a way to throw in a reference to Revelations.
Well, that's quite nice. Because obviously the FBC, it ceased, didn't it? The FBC.
They were absorbed into the BSA.
BSA, yeah, that's right. That's nice though, isn't it? It's a nice link that they could do with it, making Revelations feel a bit more prominent. Does anyone have any other news at all?
I was just going to say, there is that, obviously, the Gamescom stuff. There was a trailer up at Gamescom. It's online, but it's only been captured off a screen, so it hasn't actually officially been released. But there's discussion that it's probably the launch trailer as well, which is why it hasn't been put up straight away.
Ah.
It looks like it's supposed to end on like a big reveal related, obviously, well, not massive reveal, but leaving open questions regarding, the Ada Carla thing. But with the fact that it's pretty much already out there, it doesn't have quite the impact. But it's a good looking trailer anyway.
Obviously, therefore, we'll wait to the official release of the trailer, and then we'll probably discuss that next one whenever it comes out. Site news, and not a lot except the big discussion that's been going on the forums at the moment, orchestrated by Newsbot, is...
you make it sound like it's a crime.
No. It's whether or not Project Umbrella, the most reliable internet website for all your file translation needs, should have the official English versions of the files online. An example would be the Nikolai report at the end of Survivor. In the English version, Nikolai writes the last extract proving he's still alive, and in the Japanese one, he doesn't write it. It's written by the research team. And in fact, Nikolai's surname isn't even Genovier, it's Zinoviev. Shows how bad the English translations are. So the question is, should these even exist on the Project Umbrella website? Over to you, Newsbot.
I don't know. I'm adding them now. I think the majority have spoken, so...
Yeah, there's been quite a varied discussion about it, the pros and cons, if you like, of having them on there. So, what were you going to say?
I think the main argument for having them was that people want to compare them to the actual translations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To see exactly where they went wrong.
And there's quite a lot.
Yeah, there is. I found a few new ones today. I think I've already told John.
Go on, which ones?
Dominant species Plaga.
I'm not a guess.
Yeah. It's they're actually mentioned in Resident Evil 4, but the English translation completely removes the reference. They say something like Plaga reflects the conscience of its host. They say that in the official translation, and in the Japanese it actually just says that people with the dominant Plaga keep their own consciousness.
Oh.
So you can see that there's a really big difference. Not even the same meaning is kept between those two.
See, that's what really worries me, is that and I've seen from Newspot's work that sometimes the localizations that we got, they almost just completely to take sentences out of the blue that weren't in the original, or completely sort of without any rhyme or reason, completely miss out certain sentences. So I think the original English that we got should be included, because it's quite clear that a lot of it is just complete garbage. And I think it's actually important to highlight particularly where the canon significant changes are. And I think that can only be done to really highlight just how appalling those originals were, but by having them next to proper authentic translations.
Yeah, no, I do see that. I see that argument quite well, and it is nice, if you like, to be able to compare it and go, oh yeah, I know that file, let's find it out, and then you realise it's totally different to what you think it should be.
And I think it's interesting that via Capcom Unity, Paul hasn't had any response from anyone of any significance within Capcom.
I had one moderator tell me that he thinks the errors are charming.
Yeah. It's a strange choice of words.
charming.
I saw you comment that to Thomas Wilde on the plot analysis thing. I just had a good laugh at that. I was like, obviously the moderators don't care. They're just going to be like, oh well, we're here for Capcom games because they'll make money. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying.
It's just such a lack of effort, isn't it? As we've discussed this in previous podcasts, how.
But not just a lack of effort. Where were they getting the additional stuff that seems to be completely made up on the hoof? Where does that even come from?
Guesswork, I assume. The writers aren't involved in the translations, so the translators have free reign to do whatever they want, really.
I'd love to know the differences. I don't know. Perhaps they go from Japanese to English to French to German to Italian to Spanish. I don't know. What would the Spanish version like? It's almost like Chinese whispers at times. By the time
I think that in some cases the French versions are more accurate, but then another language just is completely off the mark. I don't know if they translated from Japanese to English then another European language, but you don't have anyone that speaks fluent French on the site, so I can't check.
But would there be any benefit to it, do you think?
No.
No.
Not yet anyway.
I know from doing the interviews with voice actors in the past too, as far as like all of the cutscenes go, there's a lot of ad-libbing and directors kind of change things that may actually be on the script, but they don't get changed in the subtitles because originally in the Japanese they had this intent, and then they kind of put the two together, and that's why sometimes they don't match. It doesn't really apply to the files, but as far as cutscenes go, that's a lot of the explanation why those don't quite often match up.
Yeah, the cutscenes are pretty bad too because a lot of characters are supposedly have different personalities between each game, such as Annette in Resident Evil 2 and Darkside Chronicles. But the reason for this is that the translators are different, the voice actors are different, and the voice directors are different. So the script gets kind of changed up a bit from when it was meant to be pretty similar to an older game. For example, Annette in Resident Evil 2 mentions that the G virus is incomplete thanks to Umbrella, but it's not in the official translation. So in Darkside Chronicles, when she mentions that the G virus is a failure, again because it's incomplete, the reference just gets missed out completely.
Same with Nikolai's surname, isn't it?
Yeah, he's even Google Translator actually translates his name accurately.
Google Translator, brilliant.
I don't know how they got Gino Vaev or whatever.
Yes, do you know? Yeah, that's the amazing thing because Operation Raccoon City just carried on with that failure.
Yeah, and in every game, Spencer is spelled with a Z, even though Oswald with a C isn't the name.
It's funny because you guys mentioned, I think it was on one of the quizzes a while back. I think it's the Survivor Guide had. Well, maybe it was the guide that had rot instead of
rot
or something. Yeah. And there was that period around probably 1999-2000 where quite often when there was character reveals, the translations would be pretty off, and rot was one of them. That was one of the ones that actually wasn't just in their guide, but we got, I think, either in press releases or something as well. And I think maybe Nikolai in Resident Evil 3 as well, even when he was being announced as a character, was wrong as well. So it's interesting that they still managed to sneak through, even not just in the games, but also in the publicized, publications and materials around it. It's crazy.
It's endemic.
The goal of the Los Illuminados in 4 is completely different between versions as well.
Is terrorism basically? It implied terrorism in Resident Evil, in the English version of Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, they add a lot of terrorism references and cleansing the world references in the English version, but in the Japanese, all they want is really just power. They mention power a lot, and I actually just updated the final file in 4 as well, which says that, like in the English version, it says that they have a backup plan for if they can't get their sort of like parasitized agents in the government to take over. They say that they'll directly just take control, but in Japanese, this is just part of their normal plan. There is no backup plan.
I hate to say it really, but sometimes there's some novelty, with the translation versions, because obviously for a period of time before we can get translations, that's what we have to go on. And only now that you kind of take it with that pinch of salt that, that's roughly the right storyline that's going on.
I remember, straight after Revelations came out, there was a lot of discussion about who Jessica worked for.
Mm-hmm.
And people immediately began speculating that because one of the files mentioned that the Global Pharmaceutical Consortium helped develop T-Abyss, they thought she worked for them.
That was all wrong, wasn't it?
Completely wrong. In Japanese, it says International Pharmaceutical Company rather than Global Pharmaceutical Consortium, which is a mistranslation itself of Federation of Pharmaceutical Companies.
Oh, really?
all the Tricell references in the game itself are completely missing. So the only way you can find it, if all you rely on is the English, is by checking out Jessica's report, which is Japanese.
We'll keep to the Japanese files, and when Resident Evil 6, we'll pick the files and then wait till we can get them translated. I'm sure, as with every game that gets released, we'll find new and interesting tidbits of storyline to keep us entertained until Resident Evil 7, no doubt. Or Dead Aim 2. Let's get that petition started.
Is that ResidentEvil.net? Was a discussion about the fact that putting the files will be available online as well?
Oh yeah, it said that as well. So hopefully it'll be easier to get the Japanese files.
Yeah, I was about to say that literally you'll be able to get a direct copy off there, and then of the Japanese version, and then translate straight from there at very quick rate, you know.
Yeah, I think we were lucky with the Revelations one. There was a Japanese site that happened to have them. I stumbled across it just Google searching it. But the ones before that, 5, it took ages to get the Japanese transcripts of those.
Is there like a Japanese version of GameFAQs where some person will always put a walkthrough with all the files on that we can access?
I don't know, I've never found one.
I think the problem with 5 wasn't it if you had a Japanese copy but you put it in an English console, it put everything out in English?
Yeah, it did that too. So you couldn't transcribe them yourself.
Yeah, you just got English.
That's clever. Right, we'll shift on from site news over to George Trevor to talk about Biohazard Mahara Desire, which is of course a prequel to Biohazard 6.
Now, I've translated most of it from the French edition. It's peculiar where there's changes in the artwork and the order of some of the pages because they're not significantly different. Some, it's hardly really worth mentioning, I suppose, but you've got various scenes where Doug Wright is just looking in a different direction or is positioned differently. So that I found a little bit peculiar. But the main thing is really, it's just, this is being taken quite seriously by people in the community as being canon and official. But while I was translating it and getting rather bored, I was just thinking to some of the other comics that get quite a hard time, where you've got, for example, depictions of the original game, which are fantastic. You've got John writing his letter to Ada as he's slowly turning into a zombie. I mean, that's great. It's odd, I think, that gets quite a hard time as being unofficial. And, you've got Barry after the mansion incident going to see a psychiatrist, which is, quite interesting. Whereas Mara Desire, I mean, it's almost like a carry-on film. You've got, not that I'm
carry on Biohazard.
I'm not averse to it. You can put the music. Da, 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 da. I know that's Benny Hill, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, there's one scene where you've got a very scantily clad schoolgirl with very, very buxom bosom leaning over one of the characters who is sort of focusing on her bosom, doesn't realise that the head is a zombie. Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I'm not going to complain too much. We've got official Resident Evil manga, but as the particular story goes, I think some of the stories in the older Wildstorm comics are far more representative of the actual game.
But at the moment, we're thinking it is canon. But I mean, I'm sure we thought potentially when the Resident Evil 5 comics were announced, we thought maybe they're going to be a
what's interesting about that, if you look at, there's some early advertisements for those that specifically say on Declassified, that the Resident Evil 5 sort of promotional booklet, on the back of Declassified, it advertises those comics as specifically being about Resident Evil 5 and actually detailing why Chris, the psychological damage done to Chris before and after the game. What we actually got had not, as we know, had nothing to do with it. So that's quite interesting. I think that originally that may have been the purpose because that's how they were actually advertised, and it specifically states that. If anyone's interested, just look at the back of Declassified, or I can send a scan in.
Part of that whole marketing campaign, though, was it? That was the same thing that those viral videos went for, the psychological damage, and they tried to make a crafter, and I mean it's even on essentially that Kajuju stuff's all over the cover as well of the game.
I'm trying to dig out Declassified.
But
what's the guy's name in the main character's name in the 5 comics?
Oh, Sugarman, something.
Sugarman, yeah.
Holiday Sugarman.
Yeah.
The difference, I think, with Mahara Desire is it is on the official Resident Evil website of Japan.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So it gets a bit more precedent, but my concern is if it's so ridiculous, there'll be a temptation just to ignore it.
From what I can see of it, the storyline is really, really slow. It hasn't picked up until recently.
Yeah, because I'm only translating the first tome, and it is very boring. Here, Wildstorm Comics, For the die-hard fans who are looking for more information on the events leading up to Resident Evil 5, or the first-time players that want to find a good way to become immersed in the current Resident Evil storyline, Wildstorm Comics is releasing a 6-part miniseries based on the famous survival horror series, blah, 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 depicting the events that led up to Chris' latest mission in Africa, including in the tale is the reveal of the dark burden that haunts Chris in the new game.
Yeah, I remember all this being. I was very excited about these kind of prequel comics because we had that bit with the prelude to the Fall, which subsequently turned out to be non-canon. But there you go.
It was pretty good though.
I like Prelude to the Fall because it's the only depiction of the hunted Delta, really.
Which is really just a normal hunter.
Yeah, but
Bigger.
Bit bigger. Right, so what's your plan, GT? What you nearly finished with that?
I'm going to finish off the translation the next day or two. I'll send it all over to Paul to put up at PU. And then, waiting, because this is tome 1, but I think it includes at least the first 6 Japanese issues. But I've asked around, and there doesn't seem to be any, published release date for the second tome, going around Europe.
Can you give us a brief summary of the plot?
Yeah, well, you've got this school, Mahawa school, which is populated by stocking-wearing Japanese females, and there's some sort of outbreak. It's interesting because you've got a mysterious character at the beginning that initiates this outbreak. I think Paul has alluded in the past to who this is meant to be. I think perhaps a character from Revelations.
I think I got every guess I made wrong.
Then you've got this...
Ark! It's Ark!
It's Steve! Barry.
You've got an expert, Doug White, who's called in to investigate, and it's just the plot follows very slowly the investigation into this outbreak, and then the differing motivations of Doug White, and then these sort of nuns that run the school. It's not particularly interesting, as I say.
Is there any talk? You said nuns running it. Is there any kind of religion aspects drawn into it?
Oh no, nothing like sort of nothing like that at all. And there's no sort of references to anything outside of Mahara Desire. There's no specific referencing of any of the previous games. I mean, you've got depicted Chris Redfield and the BSSA, but unlike what Wildstorm did originally with Collection 1, where they, depicted various scenes from the actual games, this is very much standalone. But it doesn't really have it doesn't particularly have a Resident Evil feel. So I don't know what Paul thinks, but I don't know, apart from it having the Resident Evil name, it didn't particularly feel like it was part of the universe.
Yeah, it feels very on its own. There's nothing so far connected to any of the other games, which is why the character at the beginning is such a hotly debated topic.
Is it T-Virus?
We don't know yet.
It's implied that it may be different.
Right.
Yeah. There's one small reference back to Raccoon City, and I think you see a picture of the rat spreading the virus there. But no, because I've been looking at all that. It doesn't. Well, I mean, the virus isn't given a name, but there's a reference to the solution, the sort of the antidote.
Yeah. Does it actually say vaccine, or has someone just implied it's a vaccine and called it Daylight?
He calls it Daylight. We'll have to give it Daylight, which.
So that is correct then.
Yeah, because initially when I was doing the translation.
Oh, that is very good.
Well, when I was working on the Japanese translation, I was trying to work out whether, because I was a bit confused whether they wanted to bring the zombies out into the daylight, if it was specifically referring to that. But with the French, it's clearly whatever this daylight thing is, it has to be administered. So I can't see what else it could be.
Yeah,
that's a nice link.
Yeah, I've seen a few different translations where it said daylight, but I wasn't sure if that was correct or if it was just someone being clever and it just said antivirus or something like that.
Both specifically translate as daylight.
That's good.
It's very strange, though. What happened to the Bull Pharma fucking vaccine now?
Yeah, the mass-produced one.
That's odd.
When's Mahara Desire set? What? It's just before 6.
It's before 6, after 5, but we don't know exactly when. So
yeah, as you said, Paul, that makes the Will Farmer vaccine slightly useless if there's the daylight. And considering daylight was especially only made by Greg Muller and the other one, it seems very odd that there is the daylight vaccine in circulation. There you go. Well, that's good work, GT. That's a nice Project Umbrella exclusive.
That will be up at PU for everyone to see well before the next podcast.
Is that going to be in an editorial format?
Well, all I've done is just photoshopped out the original and put the English in, and I can just make all the scans available.
Okay, that concludes our site news. So we'll now move on to our main discussion for this evening. It's Biohazard Remake.
Alpha Team is flying around the forest zone situated in northwest Raccoon City, where we are searching for the helicopter of our compatriots, Bravo Team, who disappeared during the middle of their mission.
Haven't found it yet?
No, not yet, Brett. Bizarre murder cases have recently occurred in Raccoon City. There are outlandish reports of families being attacked by a group of about 10 people. Victims were apparently eaten. The Bravo Team was sent in to investigate, but we lost contact.
Look, Chris!
Bravo Team's helicopter was a derelict. Save for the remaining body of Kevin. We continued our search for the other members, and it turned into a nightmare. This way. Damn it! Make for that mansion!
Well, what a game, what a game. As I said in the previous podcast, I will find it quite amazing if anyone really has a bad word to say against Remake. It has to be one of the greatest survival horror games ever made. There I go, I've said it. Right, that's my overall stance on it. I simply love the game, but what does everyone else think? We'll start with Romby. General overall impression.
I remember when it first came out, I was absolutely floored by just how much effort had been put into making it feel similar and new at the same time, and just the wealth of features, detail, extras. They made boss battles more epic. They gave characters better backstories or more focus in the story than they'd previously had, and of course obviously it added in a whole bunch of stuff that they'd originally planned and then axed, so I was quite impressed. I honestly, to say anything more than that at this stage, I honestly don't know what else to say.
Batman?
Yeah, I'd go along with that. It's easily my favourite game of the series. I remember when it came out, I was actually at university, and I spent my tuition fee money importing an American GameCube. Because there was something like a 5-month time difference between releases in North America and PAL regions. I'm sure it came out.
It came out in September.
Yeah.
I remember very specifically pre-ordering it from Game because you got the collector's edition DVD that came with it.
Yeah, because it obviously came out in March in Japan, and I'm sure it was out in like April, May in North America. And that's, so I spent a fortune getting it early, but it was well worth it. I remember sitting down playing it and just being blown away by the graphics, the attention to detail and the lighting effects and, things that added like the thunder and lightning, the grass moving in the wind and the fog swirling around the mansion, it was just made it so creepy. It was just brilliant.
Newsbot?
I didn't get to play it until I think it was 2004.
Oh, really?
I didn't have a GameCube at the time. Once I learned that 4 was supposedly going to be exclusive to the GameCube, I went hunting for one, literally. I was in town for like a whole day just looking for a GameCube and nowhere had one. I ended up finding one on eBay with Remake and Zero, which was pretty awesome.
I was going to say,
And-
I've got an American one on eBay now if you want it.
But once I got it, I fell in love. It was amazing. Everything about it. I love the fact that they put in stuff that they scrapped, such as the Trevor's notes. They connected it to the other games a bit more, such as a reference to the G-Virus and stuff. And they basically they managed to surprise me quite a bit on parts that I thought I would have no problem with. And before that, the only source I had for it was Resident Evil Fan at the time. I just watched videos of it on there.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we had heaps of GameCube videos up at one stage.
But it was a great game. I think it's the best survival horror game in general.
And George, what would you say about it? Because you importantly, you played it before you even played the original.
Well, I played Resident Evil 2 on the Nintendo 64 a little bit. I'm really blown away by this game. I had just moved to Bristol and I was living in the attic of a converted big Georgian house. We're not going to get too depressed. I was living with someone who was very ill, and my life at the time was quite stressful, and there was sort of depression with illness, and this game almost seemed to fit in with that. And just so much about this game, if they hadn't put in, you almost wouldn't have noticed, because I agree there's so much effort has gone into this. The inscriptions that you have, the atmosphere, the choice the developers had. You've got soundtracks that are the signature for particular rooms and really give them an atmosphere, and a really worrying concern sort of comes over you. And then you walk into rooms and there's complete dead silence, and all you can hear are the sounds of your own footsteps. In the dining room, the clock ticking. We don't even need to get onto the story or any references back to the original. There is just so much that's been put into this game that makes it feel, so iconic. Just walking down into the Crimson Head Elder's tomb for the first time, and you've got the sound of churning metal and the flickering shadows, casted by illuminated fire. And then in the background, as you're walking down those steps, you've got, sorrowful howls of wolves in the distance. And then what meets you there, that alone blew me away. I think it's one of the best video games of all time.
It was, in my opinion, the best. And what we've all touched upon is the changes, the fact that it was a remake and they added so much more. And for people that have never played the original 1996 one, obviously it's a great game in that sense, but for people who knew Biohazard 1 inside out, back to front, who could probably do it with their eyes closed, as you said, Paul, it still created lots of new challenges. Things where you didn't think you would have a problem, you found out you did. So let's discuss about the new changes. This should probably take up the bulk of the discussion, and how really was how the remake was needed. I think the important thing is.
I thought what was an extraordinary achievement was the fact that with the update of graphics, this could have been kind of like a polished super version of the original game, but they managed to keep the same almost minimalistic atmosphere. As Newspot mentioned, some of the main additions were actually, felt authentic because they were originally going to go in. So the Lisa Trevor doesn't feel like some kind of, character put in for to sensationalize things. It felt very authentic. All of the new additions felt very authentic, and almost you could be forgiven for forgetting that they weren't actually in the original game, some of them.
The changes are a mixture of subtle detail, atmosphere, and major changes. You compare sections that weren't there or were extensions and changes. You look at stuff like the Aqua Ring compared to the original, which is a massive change and probably one of the best things about the remake. And then it's just, the little nods as well. Stuff like the death masks replacing the crests, but still having the crests there, allowing you to unlock the Magnum, just so that people who've played the original still have that little hint, the crests are still in here, but it's completely changed the way that they actually work.
Yeah, I like the extension of the first floor, because I think that's one of the first things you notice is significantly different the first time you're playing it, is that suddenly the first floor mansion's a lot more, and then when you go where the zombie normally comes up from eating forest, Kenneth, you can carry on, and there's that kind of creepy bird cage, isn't there? And there's more steps going. And suddenly you're thinking, oh, okay, they've added a bit more here, and then where the painting room is, the secret exit back out into the graveyard, and suddenly you realise this is totally different. You may recognise the corridors, but this is a huge deviation from what you used to know, and The level of detail is probably the best you're ever going to get in pre-render backgrounds. They just look absolutely gorgeous. And as you highlighted, Batman, about the lighting in particular, it was the first time, I would say, since the original, that you shit yourself, scaring yourself. And it was over such minor things. I remember on the second floor by the library, that there's an L-shaped corridor, and you're going down it. And I was convinced that there's a zombie hiding behind there, because I think there usually was. And I was creeping up with a gun, slowly moving up. And then as I turned the corner, there's nothing there, but the shadow just went straight across or something, and I went, ah! It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant, and it felt so natural and organic. And again, it restored everything that you love about the original game, that creepy haunted mansion situation, and it just times it by 3. And I'll stop ranting, but even like the famous dog corridor scene, they changed it just for the hell of it. As you went down it, you're expecting the dogs to come, and then you hear a smash, but it doesn't smash. It doesn't. The dogs don't break in. You just get a kind of like that, and you wait thinking, oh, they've got to come now. So you go around the corner, still haven't come. And then every time you go back through them, you're waiting for them to come down, and you start actively avoiding the area because you don't really want to face 2 dogs just in case they really get on top of you. And I thought it was genius, just having that kind of suspense. Little things you just had no idea. Suddenly you go, okay, they've changed. I don't know what's going to happen here.
Wesker! Jill, help me look for him, but let's not leave this hall.
Good idea. Barry.
Any luck, Jill?
No, nothing. What's going on around here? I can't figure it out.
Same here.
Chris, and now Wesker.
There's not much we can do. We can search for him separately. I'll investigate the dining room again.
Okay, then. I'll try the door on the other side.
This mansion is gigantic. We could easily get lost. Let's start from the first floor.
Okay.
Oh! I almost forgot. It's a lockpick. You'd make better use of it.
Thanks. I may need it.
Listen. If something happens, let's meet up in this hall. Got it?
Okay.
I think they really, compared to the original, and obviously they were able to do this with the greater enhancements in development, the mansion really took centre stage for me. You mentioned before the particular detail, but there is even further detail in the detail. So you don't just have particularly sinister paintings that you can see are quite unnerving. You've got detailed descriptions of these paintings, letting you know exactly what they're about. And it's interesting, the errors that we have in the translated files. I'm very curious to know how accurate the descriptions we have of the paintings, just little things like that, the Book of Curse, and then when you pick that up, you've got the Old Testament, an eye for an eye, a tooth to a tooth, little things like that. Being told there are pictures of women being menaced and, praying in front of large crowds. And there's 2 particular paintings in the room where the walls come in on you. On one side, you've got what looks like a man having his throat slit. And on the other side, you've got what seems to be a young child being held down. So I think the level of detail and, the real sinister level that they've got really blew me away.
I like the really subtle things you can do. Like, you can walk down a corridor and nothing will happen. Then you can walk down the same corridor and you can hear a zombie on the other side of the door trying to open the door. And it's just rattling, but then he doesn't come through. Then you can come down again and nothing will happen at all. As soon as you pass the doorway, he bursts through and grabs you. That sort of randomness to it was really good.
Yeah, and that brings us quite nicely, I suppose, onto the Crimson Heads. Now, this was one of the huge changes. Obviously, we discussed that we had Lisa Trevor as a new BOW in the game, but the Crimos were something else, weren't they? That first time when you just see one on the floor, you're thinking, okay, he'll come back. I can handle it. I've got some ammo. And you walk past him and he doesn't come out, and then you come back. Oh, here he comes. And then he just literally runs at you, and you're like, what the fuck? And it just added so much more horror and so much more suspense and puzzle making, because you suddenly thought, yeah, I can kill him. Even if you had the ammo to kill zombies, you just suddenly decided, I'm not going to. Because unless I decapitate them or set them on fire, and I've only got a certain amount of fuel to do this, they're only going to come back and populate this mansion as these, 28-day Starlater zombies, and you weren't having any of that shit. You're like, no, I'm saving my ammo.
Yeah, the shotgun doesn't instantly decapitate them either. It's a random chance, I think.
Neither does the Magnum. Even the Magnum doesn't always shoot limbs off.
Oh, yeah.
So.
I mean, I think you can decapitate with the shotgun if you wait for that very last moment for the zombies just before they grab you. You point it upwards. That's almost the most successful way to get decapitation with the shotgun.
The thing about the fire as well, aside from decapitating, the fire element adds almost a puzzle within the puzzle. Like, there's always the thought of which areas am I going to go through the most? Should I burn the zombies I've got available, right outside the door or down the hall? It made that you had to put a lot more thought into where you're going to progress to get to certain areas, but especially going back and forth to backtrack.
Especially as you knew that you were going to come back and there's going to be hunters as well. That just made it like, okay, because you read the files about how to destroy them, and then you're like, right, I know how to destroy them. Do I want to kill it? I know I'm coming back here. I know I'm going to be faced with a shitload of hunters as well. Do I really want these super zombies roaming about as well?
And then adding in that random element as well, that certain things do still appear, like even in the later part of the game. You talked about the dogs through the window. That the dogs actually don't appear at all through the window right until pretty much the second to last time you'll go through that hallway, which is just if you go there before the Lisa Trevor fight, that's when the dogs finally appear. They hold it up for so long until you come back to that mansion the last time and keep you on suspense.
Is that when it did? I think I actively avoided that corridor for the rest of the game.
Yeah, that's when both times I've ever had them jump out, it's been right at the end if I've managed to get through that hallway on the way back, rather than going up through the second floor.
No, what I think is an incredible achievement is if you actually look at the specific gameplay when you're not fighting bosses, it is actually quite mundane. You're going to section A to get item B so that you can then access section C. And if you actually break it down like that, it is actually quite mundane. But the environment that they've put those tasks in, is so alive. I mean, I love the questions that get thrown up by the little details. I mean, you've got all the portraits, the faces are painted out. You're given no reason why, and you're kind, I'm kind of thinking, why has this happened? There's obviously quite a nasty, story behind this. You've got a picture which has been burnt purposely in several different places. I mean, it may relate to a puzzle that was taken out, but little things like that, I'm everywhere I go and every detail that I investigate, it then throws up another question. There's a journal in the study, but all the pages are blank. So it's that level of detail and the questions that you sort of keep answering gives a real history and a depth to the mansion.
On top of that as well, I love how the mansion itself is quite decrepit, more so than, say, the original, what the technology allowed anyway, back in 95, 96. But it leaves that question of how the place would have been even with people in it. And how, because there's a lot of dust coming off the floors and there's cobwebs everywhere and there's cracks and paint peeling and all that sort of thing, and it shows you how underutilized and not very well kept the whole place was anyway. And I just love that it builds that whole atmosphere of the place, and the fact that it has like a secret use of these laboratories.
And even the laboratory itself was so much more run down than it was depicted in the original game. It's hard to believe they were still using it for virus research, really.
And that was really a successful use of the graphics. I thought the lab section was just brilliant. Again, especially with the Chimera as well. The whole lab section was like shit scary. Brilliant. I thought that was. I want to talk about the very quickly, just the opening cinematic, because it's quite unique. I don't think any other Resident Evil games actually followed it. You don't have obvious cinematics in this game. It's all kind of almost like in-game videos throughout the whole videos. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
You never have that kind of obvious widescreen section. It's quite apparent in Resident Evil 0, and that they put a lot of effort in the FMVs. But here it all just kind of flowed very seamlessly.
Yeah, I mean, I think rather than those, I think almost what you've got instead is the not just the camera angles, but the particular camera angles that you immediately get when you walk through a door. So you come through one door, and I think the first floor. East door, the first door on the first floor that you open with the sword key. As you go through that door,
you look at yourself
immediately right on you. You can hear the shuffling footsteps of something that doesn't quite sound human in its movements, but you can't see directly in front of you. The camera is right up on the screen, and you're forced to move immediately forward into the unknown. You can hear something's going on. You get that, I think, particularly when you enter the residence for the first time, without the sound, but the camera's right up on Jill. I don't know how common it was to use that technique, but I think they used it brilliantly in this game.
There's a little bit of it in the original. That one in the mansion's definitely there. I don't remember if the one in the guardhouse was, but there's no sense of danger or elements. There's no noise or anything. It's just a close-up shot. You come through the door, and I guess the only suspense is, should I move forwards? Is there going to be something right in front of me? The director's cut and also the remake make use of the theatre room. There's that mirror, and so it has that close-up shot of the character, but you can see an enemy reflected in the mirror behind you, which I thought was also quite clever in that same way.
Again, the guardhouse section was one of my favourites in the original, because I thought that was one of the hardest sections in the game, because you were suddenly introduced to spider BAWs, you had Neptune, you had Plant 42, you had the vines as well, didn't you, creeping up through the holes. And
you had the
wasps. Yeah, exactly. And it was all suddenly like the level of difficulty ramped up, I thought, and it suddenly turned into, okay, this is not just random zombies. And I thought they portrayed the guardhouse bit just as brilliantly. The music I thought was immense. That kind of like, that was really scary back in the day.
If you look on the floor, I made a note because I wouldn't have known this otherwise, but it says A644-1 when you go down, because that was how I was going to reference that music, because I'd never heard it before, and it was, to me, that was pure zombie horror film. Each particular track is quite distinct, they're not kind of using the same sort of sounds. And Nick, that really hit me when usually you would go down into Aqua Ring and you get dun 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 dun, and and there's nothing else there, but just that alone was really unnerving and kind of really brought the experience alive. I'm playing video games at an age when perhaps I shouldn't be, and obviously as you get away from being a child, started playing video games when I was 8, and you can really throw yourself into that world. It's becoming increasingly harder as I become a boring adult, but there's no problem with that with Remake. Even today, I was playing it, and I'd been, after you return to the mansion, you've killed Plant 42 and you've got the hunters going around, and I got poisoned by one of the snakes when I was trying to lift up the water so I could expose the fountain and go into the tombs, the catacombs. And I was poisoned by one of the snakes, so I had to go all the way back to the mansion, into that room where you've got the blue herbs growing.
Yep.
Thinking to myself, well, I've already dispatched the zombie that's in there, and completely forgot that you've got a hunter that bursts through the door if you go in there for a second time after you've killed the zombie. And yeah, fucking hell, my heart skipped a beat there. That took a few months off my life.
Yeah, I said that's almost like that kind of random element, isn't it? You just don't know what to expect, and I think that was its biggest success, was that for hardcore fans, as I said, who probably knew the game inside out, back to front. Certainly, I completed Biohazard 1 more times than any of the others. It just became so random and so unpredictable as you play through. You just didn't know what to expect. And I think you touched on the zombies at the door. The who was it? He was the one that get poisoned by the yawn.
Richard,
yeah, because sometimes he bursts through after.
You mean Forrest?
Is it Forrest? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Forrest. Sometimes he bursts through, and sometimes he doesn't. There's a mode about him, isn't there, when you complete the game? One dangerous zombie mode, and then he gets
grenades on him.
Yeah. If you blow him.
Sorry, where does Forrest? What are we talking about when Forrest makes the appearance?
You unlock a mode.
Oh no, I've got that. So I've got the guy with I've got him when he's running around with grenades around him. But Nick,
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, sometimes he bursts through the room and starts chasing you as a Crimson Head, I think. And sometimes he doesn't. As I said, it's all this kind of random, unpredictable nature.
Sorry, I thought you meant kind of before you play that mode, because you only find him kind of pecked to death, don't you, on the terrace?
Going quickly back to subtle differences again, like in the guardhouse, you think you've seen it all, even like the wasp nest and things, but then there's that a nice new, quite minor point in one of the bunk bedrooms with a man with who's killed himself. That's that really harrowing note he's left, and then you got the hand cannon. You got one shot if you want to take him out or not, or do you want to save it? And that's nice. It wasn't particularly difficult. Was you could see what was going to happen, but
that's another random element. Sometimes he doesn't drop.
Oh yeah.
No. Yeah, so I went in, like I've had it go, it happens that he drops pretty much straight away. I've had it so that he doesn't drop at all. I've had him that I've gone into the bathroom and both him and the zombie that are already in there get up at the same time. Like it's completely random.
And even today, I've been playing this game solidly for years, and even the other day something new happened. Lisa Trevor's cabin. When she enters, I just happened to be standing at a particular point where I was looking out of a window that overlooked the door that she comes in, and you can actually see her walking in. I'd never seen that before.
That's quite cool.
Yeah, if you stand by her bed, there's like a window, like an internal window, and it looks over the front door, and you can actually see her coming in and shuffling across.
Yeah, see, I was a big fan of the Lisa Trevor involvement, especially because you got to go outside a bit more. I always think Biohazard is actually best when you're out in the forest and the wilderness, and I think it was one of Zero's biggest failings, not exploring the Arclay forest as much as I think they should have done. So I was pleased in Remake you got to spend a lot of time out, although it's very linear, wasn't it? But you got to still spend a bit of time in the darkness at night, and you had no idea what was coming. Of dog, you'd hear the dogs when they're going to burst out, and you had Lisa was around as well, and I thought that was good. And the skulls, didn't you, pointing down all the hands. That was wicked.
I got my biggest scare out of the entire game in the forest. After you visit the cabin the first time, there's a zombie that's out there.
You just don't expect...
I killed it and it landed in the grass and I completely forgot about it. And then the second time when you come back, obviously you come back through from the mines, and I was just running through there thinking, oh yeah, there's nothing around, I can't hear anything. All of a sudden this crimson head just pops out of the grass and I couldn't see it entirely. And I honestly just crapped my pants. Like, it was the scariest thing I've seen in any of the games probably. I totally didn't expect it. And I just, because I'd forgotten, I was like, oh yeah, I've cleared out all the zombies, I've cleared out all the crimson heads. And there I was proved completely wrong.
As I said, it makes the extra tactical element because you had to suddenly start loading up your map again and thinking, now I killed a zombie here, I didn't get rid of him, how long have I got? You started noting where you last saw that zombie and whether or not you're going to go back and try and kill it. Or
that's also a random element because you sometimes go past a zombie that you've downed 3, 4, 5 times and it won't get up, and then sometimes you'll knock one down the next time you come in and it gets up straight away. It's always that unknown as well.
I want to quickly talk about the T-virus in this, because this was something that caused a lot of debate at the time. I'm sure Newsbot can testify. This magical 3-month rule that kind of seemingly came out of Mikame's mouth, but no one can ever relay that particular interview, that you'll only get a Crimson Head if the zombie has been, or that the person has been infected with the T-virus for 3 months. I remember this debate quite well. But if everyone can remember, it was always about this mythical interview that no one can relay, but everyone knows about it, and it ultimately proved to be completely wrong. And we had a new strain of the T-virus, which was developed based on the blood of the first Crimson Head, which just had that unique mutation.
The problem was it wasn't mentioned in English, so...
But it was. This is the whole, I remember. It's in the archive, in the English archives. It's quite.
Oh, it's in archives, but not in the game.
Sure. I said I remember looking at it and I just totally disregarded it. I remember when before we had PU, and we had our little secret forum. I remember looking at it going, "Oh, is that right?" And I don't know why. I just completely disregarded it, thinking, "Oh, archives must be wrong." But it says in the archives that it's a different type of T-virus.
Yeah, I think in about 2005. People were a lot more critical of archives at the time. If anything didn't fit with the games, it was just considered nonsense, really. But that's been proven to be completely opposite.
And yeah, so it's a unique T-virus variant, I said, that causes that, and it's never really been back again. We've had in Umbrella Chronicles the kind of forced V-Act.
Oh no, it was Darkside. Though Crimson Tides are in Umbrella Chronicles.
Yeah, it is in the Russian facility. And I'm not that clear on, because you had semi-Crimson Heads in Darkside.
I think so. They look a bit different, but...
And Leon notes it in the game, doesn't he? He goes, oh, these look a bit different.
Yeah.
I think they were putting suspended animation or something to slow the V-Act process down or something.
To retain a bit of control? Is that right?
I don't know.
But yeah, it's a unique T-virus, and but that's the cause of it, and that's why you can't have Crimson Heads in any other game unless otherwise said. Right, what others? Lisa Trevor, the Trevor. Let's expand it on the Trevors. George, I know obviously this is very close to your heart. This game finally brought the Trevors, who are briefly mentioned in the original game.
I hadn't played the original. It's unfortunate. It would have been a great experience for me. I wasn't aware of the Trevor diaries from the 15-minute demo. What really, because obviously George Trevor himself, you've got greater, more rounded characters in the actual game. But what really got me, perhaps it was my inexperience in playing these types of video games, but was the real level of desperation and tragedy you had. You've got this guy, his daughter and his wife have been murdered. I mean, that in itself, it was just dealing with that 14-year-old girl being incarcerated and mutated. That really got to me. I think that the actual Trevor diary is a great use of having, you've got this, well, it's only split into 2, isn't it? But you've got almost like a running commentary of someone else that's a fellow prisoner as you, but this has happened in the past. And there's always that suggestion that whatever fate befell Trevor is going to befall you as the player. So as you're further investigating into this mansion, you're reading what previously happened to Trevor. And I'd say it's almost a commentary to what you're expecting to happen. And you've got these elsewhere. You've got the desperation of Martin Crackhorn, in his will.
Sorry, I'm a child. Karen.
And I don't know if it's him or someone's begging Linda, his wife, for forgiveness. So, you've really got a sense that you're not the only one in here and that there have been others before you. And you get the real, desperation of these characters and the loved ones that they've lost, the wives and the daughters. So I found that quite moving.
It was, and I think that the tragedy of Lisa Trevor certainly played out. And it's definitely by the time you fight her, the final time, I think where the body of Jessica is.
Yeah, the pushing the stones.
Yeah, you felt really sorry for her. You wanted to, because you knew you couldn't beat her. Because she was indefeatable with conventional weaponry, and you felt for her, didn't you? And
they don't pull any punches, Capcom, with this. It's not as if there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Someone's wife and 14-year-old daughter have effectively been murdered. I can't remember the guy that Ron B mentioned that's hanging. You don't just have newspapers with a bit of blood on there. If you read the description, someone has actually vomited up blood onto the newspapers. So I think the level of detail that's gone into these particular tragedies, not just with George Trevor, with the Martin Crackhorn and the Keeper. I mean, the Keeper's diary again doesn't pull any punches at all. By the end of it, itchy tasty.
It's classic.
Yeah.
Wesker.
Jill, so you're safe.
That's what I was going to say.
I apologize. It was all I could do to protect myself against those strange creatures.
I understand. Anyway, it's good that you're safe.
Did you notice? Barry, he sounded a little flaky.
Now that you mention it, yeah. I'll keep a close eye.
Maybe it's quite natural under these circumstances. It's not really our standard operation. Jill, our first priority is to get out of here.
I agree.
There are still rooms in that mansion we can't get into because they're locked up. I've been looking for ways to...
Okay, if there's anything, I'll go back to the other mansion.
I'm counting on you.
I was just going to ask, I don't know if anyone noticed, in the guardhouse right beside where you meet Wesker in the hallway, which is one of the few things not in Jill's game, but in Chris's game, one of the few things I have issue with, but I'll get back to that. There's a stack of newspapers by the window, and if you search it, it says the articles are all about stars.
Yeah.
I thought that was really weird. It was one of the few things I was really weirded out about. I was like, who's been collecting articles about stars, and why are they in the guardhouse?
It doesn't really fit for me. You're right, because you've got obviously the only person with a secret agenda and an interest in stars is Wesker, who obviously doesn't need to collect those articles. I mean, it does suggest, doesn't it, that there's some sort of conspiracy going on.
Yeah, well, there's another fun one in the recreation room. It says there's an arm wrestling contest for being chief of police for a day.
Yeah, that's the prize. Yeah. It's a very sort of strange prize.
I thought the newspaper one might be a throwback to the file that you get in the original Resident Evil, which has all those newspaper clippings, which obviously has about the stars investigating the murders in the forest. But I kind of thought maybe that was the intent, but it doesn't come off that way. It kind of seems creepy and a bit weird.
But this is what's so great about this game, is that you've got little things like that we've got at PU. You've got whole threads just discussing these tiny little, iconic moments or descriptions. I mean, another one is the room on the first floor where you've got the bed and the description that it looks like there's footsteps running through the bed. And that...
Oh, yes, yeah. Regards to Wesker, like in Jill's game, obviously, you have the sub-story with Barry, and Barry's obviously always being that support person. He brings you ammo, he fixes the door handle, which was also another nice little touch. But I kind of find it a bit weird in Chris's game that Wesker becomes that person. He gives Chris gifts basically, he fixes the door handle and he turns up for the fight at the end. It kind of goes against the whole point of what seemingly Wesker's goals were, especially around Zero and just in general as well.
Whereas Barry's loyalties are tied, Wesker's never.
Yeah, exactly. It's always a little bit unsettled to me.
I wonder if Wesker's just trying to sort of keep the others alive long enough to record some decent combat data.
Yeah, that's the vibe I got. He's trying to allow them to fight the BOWs, otherwise if they're empty-handed and they're just going to get destroyed basically.
But the differences between the original game, where Barry's role still existed with the extra items, because obviously Jill was the easier game option, but also that it was part of the story. Chris didn't have that, and it's one of those things they've added in the remake that I don't think just works quite as well. But I do understand that getting the bio weapon test data probably does make it a bit more of a priority.
Another thing about Wesker that took me a while to sort of get my head around was in the original game he sort of came across as your sort of self-assured leader who was on Umbrella's payroll, but he didn't really know much about what was going on. At least that's the impression I got. He obviously saw a bit about the virus, he saw the Tyrant, realised the power it wields, and then he wanted that. Whereas in the remake, obviously they've changed it with Wesker's report too, when it turns out he's been on Umbrella's, he's not just been on their payroll, he's been one of their chief researchers for 20 odd years, and he was actually involved in the virus development. And obviously since then, the subsequent games that have come out, it all fits really well. But going back to when Remake first came out, I found that a little hard to take at the time.
Yeah, Wesker doesn't look like a researcher. He certainly doesn't act like one either.
Every time you see him in those slides, it's it's the original or the remake, he just looks so out of place. The guy with sunglasses.
But this is more the original. But I remember when you first pick up that slide and you see it and you go, "I knew it," or something like that. It's just that, because especially if you're Jill, you assume Barry's a baddie, don't you? It's quite obvious, and you kind of forget about Wesker, and then you just see it and go, "There it is."
Do you think it's a purposeful point with Barry and the fact that he's a traitor, but he's effectively been forced in that position? I don't know if it's a purposeful touch, but the fact that he's the one that's always giving Jill, was it the can of fizz, as he calls it? And he's until the very end, he's very much there to help Jill with ammunition, with lockpicks and things like that. So I don't know if that was kind of trying to suggest that at heart obviously he was a good man.
Yeah, we were just saying that his loyalties were fairly tied, weren't they, between Stars and obviously his family, what Wesker was bribing him.
In the original, he's openly conflicted, like the part when you drop down the hole in the piano room, and he drops the rope on purpose, but then says he'll go back and get another one, and he eventually does, which just highlights the conflict in him.
It's perhaps better reflected in the remake, the confrontation around Lisa Trevor, but then there's also that scene in the mines where he takes the lift back up, and it seems like, oh, what an absolute douchebag.
Yeah.
I was going to ask as well, sorry for this, there are a few changes in the game that perhaps are missing. Well, maybe it was more noticeable at the time when I first played it, in 2002 against the original, but there's a few things in the game that I was quite surprised didn't get changed, like the shotgun trap roof doesn't fit anywhere in the mansion. Like, those sorts of things never got changed in the remake. They redesigned the entire mansion, and yet you go into there, there's no way that roof could collapse where it's placed on the first floor, on the ground floor, and it still hasn't been changed.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
I'm no architect, but could it be a full ceiling, a separate ceiling to the...
It's a giant concrete slab that slides down on the floor above.
I'm no architect.
And the room above it, I think, if I remember correctly, is supposed to be the one. Well, in the original, it'd be the big open room where you have the yawn battle, where it makes the hole in the floor. And in the remake, it's the one with the statue, which you have to push. But there's still no space where a concrete slab could just come out of the floor.
That's a very good point.
But and on that point, though, as well, is there any... I think there was a lot of missed opportunities, especially it's obviously open to interpretation, the fact that there's no one particular canon path, but I kind of expected more of a tie-in with Rebecca and Zero. There's a lot of... She's almost a different character yet again between the two games.
Yeah, considering both were in development at roughly the same time. I know it's all part of the story because obviously she didn't want to get in trouble about Billy, but you're right that the characters are very different. They could have been a bit more crossover.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there any other that issue or any other missing elements they kind of think should have been there for the other games?
Considering the definitive version, if you like, of the original is the Sega Saturn version, I'm surprised Ticks weren't in there. I thought they could have made the Saturn version a bit more prominent. Obviously, very few people got to play it, so why not have them roaming around as well?
Bring me my gold tyrant.
Damn straight, yeah. Well, they could have done, couldn't they? But it would have been a bit odd. But I'm surprised. It's not that much of an issue, really, is it? But I was semi-half expecting them when I was playing through it the first time. I thought when I get to the I remember getting to the catacombs especially, and getting, I wonder if we're going to have hunters here, or we're going to have brown hunters as they, almost are, aren't they?
I've just clicked onto another thing was that obviously for I think all of you played the remake obviously quite fresh, maybe previously played the original game, but none of you had seen the videos and the stuff online beforehand, aside from Paul, obviously, as you were saying before, because they obviously had the Japanese website, and every week they were putting up these videos of here's a creature, here's a character, here's a weapon that you get to use, and it kind of showed off all the elements of the game even before it even came out.
No, I came to it completely new. I played Resident Evil 2 on the Nintendo 64, and simply because that was obviously a sequel, I was intrigued by where, how the story began. I hadn't played the original, and what certainly got me, the only thing I really noticed prior to playing the game in the reviews was what interested me. I hadn't had this experience before, that there were quite a few different endings, quite a few different takes on how you could complete the game.
And there's quite a lot of game modes afterwards. We've already touched upon. There's once again mode, wasn't there? Then there's one dangerous zombie mode.
Visible enemies.
Oh yeah, that's pretty difficult, wasn't it?
Which is really hard.
Real survivor mode as well.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. How many? I think he originally wanted it to have, where you dropped your items, they stayed in that particular item box, and I think wasn't that how he initially had wanted the game to be?
Yeah.
And what was quite good, the voice acting was still shocking, wasn't it, as well? Although a bit better.
It has its moments. It's better than the original. Like I have to admit, when I replayed it this week, and it's the first time I probably played Remake in about 6 or 7 years. There's a lot of stilted lines. It's not bad delivery. It's just a lot of weird pauses. But there's still some clunky dialogue in there. Stuff that doesn't make sense. I think that whole conversation that Jill has with Wesker in the guardhouse doesn't make any sense.
What
conversation? What did she say?
Wesker's disappeared. You have to remember. So obviously he disappeared. He came back out into the dining room. He disappeared, and then she comes out. And in the original, there's that conversation about he went missing, and she makes a weird statement. I can't remember what it is in the remake exactly, but I know that she kind of skips over even asking him where he disappeared to. She just kind of assumes that he always just arrived. Oh well, and there's no questioning, there's no back and forth about it, and then he basically orders her to go back to the mansion, and she just does it anyway. Like, if your boss had kind of flaked out on you and disappeared and doesn't tell you why he disappeared, would you still want to take orders from him?
And she had suspicions as well, didn't she, at that point?
Because he's disappeared. She seems kind of cautious about him, but then she still goes, yes, I'll go back to the mansion. It's still very quite clunky.
Is that you, Jill?
Is that voice Enrico's?
Yeah?
You're alive!
Stop! Are you with anybody, Jill?
No, but why?
The stars are finished. Someone is a traitor. Umbrella set us up.
Enrico! Traitor? Who?
And that's another thing. I mean, I know a majority of people playing this game would have played the original, but the remake makes no attempt whatsoever to hide the fact that Wesker is a traitor, really. I mean, when Jill hears Barry's conversation with someone in the guardhouse, in the original you can just hear Barry. In this one, you can clearly hear him talking to Wesker. And even when Enrico gets shot, you can recognise Wesker's boots, and the gunshot is Wesker's samurai edge. It didn't really do much to make the traitor of the Stars team, a mystery.
I think this is going back to that website thing. I think a lot of it was that they just remade it with the intent that they were knowing that there's a lot of people who played the original out there, and it wasn't really focused to get new people on board. It was more the nostalgia of the original. I mean, that the first marketing they did behind it was entirely based on that. So I maybe they're just like, let's make it blatant, let's throw it completely out the window.
Okay, well, we touched on some negatives, but what negatives can anyone really think of the game in general? I mean, are we talking about the controls? Did they seem even outdated then? Was it in need of a major overhaul? Did anyone think the pre-rendered backgrounds should have been fully 3D, or we had Code Veronica by then? What negatives can anyone draw from the game?
I mean, I would only nitpick because I mean, as you mentioned, the controls, I completely forgot. I mean, I had a significant period of time where the controls ruined the entire experience for me, and it was really only the fact that I could see that if I could get past this, there was the most phenomenal game to be played. I mean, it took me a good few days before I could even, control the figure without it going around in 360 all the time. I think there's two different options for the controls, and I know certainly that one I can't use at all. It's completely unusable for me, and I can only use the other one. The pre-rendered backgrounds, the detail is stunning, and you couldn't at the time have achieved that detail with 3D backgrounds, so I wouldn't criticize it for that. One thing that frustrates me is if you, with Jessica Trevor by Lisa's Tomb, if you push the 4 stones off and you, as Jill, and you keep Barry alive, you don't get to pick up, if you keep Barry alive, you don't then get to pick up that little photograph of him and his family. That's the only thing that used to.
What a shit game!
I can't pick up the file.
Yeah, and I was quite anal with having every single file, and that used to annoy me a bit.
You touched on the controls. I mean, I was really concerned about the controls before I got the game, because is what I bought the GameCube for. Obviously I was very used to the PlayStation controls. I've still got the Resident Evil controller for the PlayStation. I'm not sure if anyone's ever used it. The most horrendous controller you'll ever play with.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like that chainsaw one. The actual game that it relates to is unplayable.
Yeah, well this is the one that's got one handle looks like a gun.
Gun grip, the tea bags.
Yeah, oh my god, I once had one of those tea bags. I was so desperate for tea. I thought to myself, I'm going to sell this on eBay.
Oh, that's awful. And of course the GameCube controller is quite unique, isn't it? It is actually heralded as one of the greatest controllers that's ever been released.
I absolutely hate the octagonal control stick. It drives
the C stick.
No, just the analog one. It's got
the
8-sided shape, and it's so uncomfortable for a game like Resident Evil where you're constantly pushing hard in one direction.
I thought it worked okay. So I came into a lot of trepidation, but I thought, a bit like George said, after you got used to it, it worked okay. And you had the quick turn, didn't you, with the C stick?
Yeah, C stick, or you could still do it the old-fashioned way, which is down in the opposite way from where you're facing. And
yeah, apart from that, I mean, I'd say I thought the controls were getting a bit out there, and I think even by the time you had Zero is definitely the last one that could really do with these controls. Yeah, as I said, apart from that, I mean, I find it difficult to really find that much fault with the game. As I said, we've talked about the atmosphere in particular and how emotive and genuinely scary, and that's quite hard to say actually in a game. Even compare it to Zero, which you never felt really was that scary, but Remake sustained that scare throughout.
I mean, if they gave awards for the scores of video games, I mean, this one, for me, I can't think of any other video game where the background music is just so perfectly accompanied with your surrounds and really adds a further dimension to the horror. And again, all quite different. The Neptune tank music, the first floor hallway music. I think Capcom absolutely surpassed themselves with the score.
Can we just have a quick mention on Neptune moment? Because I know we did when we did the original. I remember, George, you quite expressly saying, the most superior Neptune moment obviously occurred in Remake. And I just very briefly want to talk about it as my prerogative as host. How great was it? I'm sorry. That was especially because you can get, depending on how you play it, you had
Richard,
Jesus Christ, I'm terrible. Richard come down as well, doesn't he? And he comes there and tries to be a hero. And I mean, the Great White is huge. And you're like, oh, flippin' heck. And the whole aquaring moment is absolutely brilliant. And you just run like shit. And if you're injured at all, you are so screwed.
That's one of those things I was going to say about the controls, is that the controls I found the controls completely adequate for the entire game, for the general, as GT said before, the mundaneness, but with the atmosphere, but you're just walking around shooting zombies and stuff. But when it came to the bosses, because the bosses have changed, I found the controls are actually out of touch with those bosses. The snake moves a lot faster, the sharks are way more vicious, and as you're saying, if you're low on health, you're screwed. You're absolutely screwed.
No, very good point. So you couldn't make it past the Neptune bit. You had if you got attacked by one of the little ones and you couldn't get it to the room to do the puzzle.
There was another example for me of just the way that just new things are occurring and can surprise you in this game. Because no matter how many times I tried, I always used to get bitten by that tiny little shark, the first one. So I'd had enough, and so the other day I just started shooting him and killed him. And I didn't notice, if you kill the first shark, there's then this split-second kind of cutscene where the larger one just kind of goes for you, and then I don't know if anyone's noticed that.
Oh, it tries to bite onto the actual platform you're on.
I think sort of kind of lunges for you, which I've never seen before, and I presumed only happened because for the first time ever I actually shot the very first shark that you come across.
Ah, that's good.
You're sloshing through the water, aren't you? And then the screen suddenly starts to shake, and you know it's coming.
Yeah.
And that was one of the surprise kills at the end when you've drained the water, the shark's just flopping around. And in the original, that didn't do anything, I don't think. But then I thought, ha, goodbye, Neptune. And then it can still eat you and kill you. And I was like, oh, you fucker.
That was so satisfying, electrocuting him.
Yeah, it was. But he can still kill you if you get too close. And
after electrocuting him?
No, before you electrocute him, you drain the water. You get he's flopping around, and you've got to jump up onto the ledge before you electrocute him. And if you get too close, he can still take you down. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, no, I remember. I'm sure I remember dying that way. And I was like, "You fucker!" Oh, that's good.
That's another positive I didn't even think about before. Is just the animation's still absolutely stunning. Like if you get killed or knocked out, and it's every time you see it, obviously when Lisa knocks you out, but the characters and also zombies just like fall with this weight that looks just absolutely realistic. Like they just drop, but everything lets go, and all the animations of just about everything in the game is just absolutely stunning.
And what I also like is that not everything was obvious. Where you had to, obviously you had the things shining and stuff, but everything seemed to work so well. It wasn't obvious that you could push that item and things like that. And I think it's still good. Right. I think we can look at scoring. What I can predict the scores, but we'll quickly run through them. What did everyone think out of 10? George?
Well, I know it's boring, but it's 10 out of 10. But specifically, I'm not just lazily giving it that. I can't think of any. You asked before that there's no significant fault in this game at all. If you can get past the controls, it's 10 out of 10. Absolutely.
Batman?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's practically perfect. It's by far and away the game I've played the most. It's easily my favourite game.
Newsbot?
Yeah, gonna have to agree. It's pretty much the perfect game for the genre.
And finally, Romby?
I'm going to be the combo breaker. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Bastard!
Only because, and I just say this, as I said before, I haven't played it in about 6 or 7 years, and it took me a while to warm back into it. And it was, at the time, one of my favourite games. It probably is still ranked as probably my favourite, or maybe second to the original, only because I played that endlessly between 96 and 98. The backgrounds have started to age, and I would love Capcom to put this out in HD. I really would. I would play it endlessly if they put it out in HD. And if that was the case, it'd be a 10 out of 10. Just on that little bump and the fact that I when playing the game wasn't quite as I remembered, there was more nostalgia to it, I'm just going to drop it down to 9 out of 10, but still pretty awesome.
Before we move on, I just want to say, Newspot is Mikami gets a lot of praise for this game, and I think it's rightly deserved in this one. His contributions of this is quite high compared to others, where we found out it wasn't as high as perhaps everyone thought.
Oh yeah, the reason it wasn't changed as much, and pretty much it has the perfect amount of changes, was because Mikami openly knew that if you made too many changes or too little, people would complain.
So he quite rightly deserves the praise for this one, for making it. Probably. Yeah. Oh, excellent. And what are the chances of an HD release? Because it's never been anything other than on a Nintendo console. I can't imagine the exclusivity deal still applies, does it?
I was going to say, I think the issue is that they have to go back and redo all the backgrounds, because I don't like that. I mean, the elements, they've still got them, obviously, they used them for Umbrella Chronicles, but they'd have to re-render everything in a high resolution. Is the remake on Wii in widescreen?
Oh no, you have to turn widescreen options off. It's appalling.
So it's still in 4:3. So there's another issue as well.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. No different to the original.
Oh, there you go. All right, well, we'll live and hope. Well, that concludes our discussion on the remake. Unless anyone else want anything else to contribute, finally.
Oh, just before that, I mentioned that George Trevor has his diary split into 2, but there's actually a third note from George Trevor, which I particularly enjoy because he references a picture of a mansion in the back of the art room. You know, this secret sanctuary that even Sir Spencer doesn't know about. And I took particular enjoyment from the fact that letter's undated. You know, the developers purposely left this undated, so suggesting that it could be the last letter that he wrote. And it's, you know, it slightly leaves it open-ended, you know, in terms of what his fate was.
Oh yeah.
Until Nick plays Genesis and then tells me that George was founded in cell in Genesis.
There was always that discussion that the Crimson Head in the tomb was possibly George Trevor, but that's never confirmed, was it? It was
I think it may have been Newsport that I read made the point that it couldn't be George Trevor because the T virus, which obviously had infected the Crimson Head Elder, wasn't in existence in '67 when George was incarcerated.
No T virus was.
But you've just made the point that file didn't have a date on it, so how long do we know he was alive for?
That's a good point. But well, he would have had to have survived to the '80s, wouldn't he?
He's got a beard. I don't know. It's a possibility.
Well, that would be a showstopper if he turns up in Resident Evil 6 or 7 or something.
George Trevor was behind it all.
Yeah, exactly.
The theory is that Crimson Head was the very first example, and that's kind of why the scientists particularly incarcerated him like that. It was the first example they'd seen of the VAC process.
Yeah,
I've always wondered what that liquid is, because you the chains come off and it's not blood. I don't think it's blood, but is it liquid that he was stored in? What?
Oh, is it not? I always thought it was blood because what spatters on there's that effect.
But it's a lot. It's a lot of it. Like I don't know. I mean, it could be, but
because it splatters on the camera, doesn't it? There's that effect where it's as if you're looking through a camera and you've got it spattered on the camera. I think it's blood, from what I remember.
It's reddish in colour anyway.
But yeah, you're right. There is quite a lot of it, isn't there?
Yeah.
Quite how putting Death Mask on Unchained. I don't know, but you don't worry about things like that. Right.
Oh yeah, that's my only other criticism. Each time you put a Death Mask on, you've got that fantastic effect where it's but the third Death Mask hardly has any effect on it. You've got the first Death Mask and the chain drops and it shakes, and then the second one it's almost about. Then you put the third one on, it's just a little wiggle, and that was it.
And then it just drops on the fourth one. It just goes bonk.
Yeah, it's the shuffling.
Remember. Biohazard.
Well, we've had a call in from our regular call in contributor Vito, so let's take a listen and see what he's got to say.
I feel old. I can't believe it's been 10 years since I played this game. Remake is in fact the first game in the series that I got and completed. Yes, George, you're not alone there. I actually played the original many years later. I remember seeing Remake on a game shop here in Mexico after seeing the first Resident Evil movie, and since I had a GameCube, decided to get it. Funny story, my brother, who's 3 years younger than me, went there to get it for me the next day. The reason for this is because he got off school earlier than me. I was in middle school and he was in primary school. I think that's what you call it there. And I remember thinking all the way back to my home that day, man, he's gonna be the first one to play it. And I won't be able to play that day, and stuff like that. But to my surprise, when I got home, he was watching TV. So I immediately thought the worst and asked him, why the hell are you not playing? Does the game suck? Or what? Answer us, damn it! And I still remember his answer as clear as day. I got scared. Holy fucking shit. It wasn't common here that a video game scares you. So I immediately rushed to my room and began playing it. Oh my god, I loved the atmosphere and got sucked into the game immediately. The characters, the story, the graphics, the zombies, they were all amazing. The first time that you enter a room and hear a zombie's moan, it's just amazing. It gets your blood pumping. It really, really is something else. It's a really great fucking feeling. And I can't forget the fantastic soundtrack. Tracks like Lost in Darkness, Disappearance, they really got the mood going throughout the entire game. Everything was perfect. Everything. In my opinion, this is the ultimate survival horror game. Especially playing the unlockable mode, the real survival mode. It was just mind-fucking blowing. And it's sad that this current market, won't allow for a game as this special to be made again. It sucks, but no game will ever surpass the epicness that I experienced while playing Remake. Never. No, senor. Not in terms of horror, story, characters. It will never be a game that surpasses Remake for me in those departments. Capcom really made the survival horror masterpiece, and I can't wait to see if Resident Evil 6 is their survival action horror, whatever you want to call it, masterpiece. And since there's only 40 something days left, the wait won't be much longer. But in the meantime, if you excuse me, I'm gonna go and play Remake again because, man, just amazing. I have to play it.
Alright,
there you go. Yeah.
I think he shares our views that we've all had. It was
quite strange hearing Vito not angry. I really just want to go to Mexico and play Remake with Vito. I thought that was a brilliant call. And the word he used, masterpiece. And you could hear, in his voice when he was talking about his first experience with the zombie. Fantastic. I want to go to Mexico now.
Anyway, that's really uninteresting. But yes, I think Vito shares our views that we relayed, just how important the game was in the series, and he certainly obviously had the experience that a lot of us had, perhaps even with the original, but was reaffirmed very much in Remake, and obviously holds dear in our hearts this game. That was our only call in this week, folks. So keep them coming in. Okay, well that conclude our discussion, and we'll now move on to Neptune and Newsies. Biohazard quiz.
5 questions, 3 participants, and 1 topic. It's Neptune and Newsies Biohazard quiz.
So hello and welcome to this edition of Neptune and Newsies Biohazard quiz. I'm sure you're all very excited. A quick recap of the scores after our Olympic special. Batman, you are in the lead with 29.5. George Trevor is third on 21. Mr. Spencer's on 23.5. Terrible order for me saying that, but never mind. A quick recap of the guest scores. Ridley's on 4, Welsh is on 3, Smiley's on 3, Syndra came in with 2.5. Selfish Gene, Ty, and Zombie Fred scored a solitary point. Romby, it's your turn this week.
No.
You can join the illustrious
1-pointers, perhaps, maybe.
Well, once again, Mr. Spencer's deciding that World of Warcraft is far more exciting than a Project Umbrella podcast, and he's wasting his money doing that. So, Romby, would you step in for Mr. Spencer?
Oh. Can I score so badly that we can start giving him negative points now?
But I'm sure George doesn't mind. Now, Romby, I do believe you're one of our many listeners of the podcast, so I think you know the rules and how it works.
Okay.
Yes. So, you may actually need in this one certainly a bit of pen and paper opening for this, or a notepad open, because there may be some writing down to do.
Uh-oh.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. It may be, I don't know. It depends how good your knowledge is. So, without further ado, let's crack on with the quiz. So, if everyone gets their desktops clear, question number 1 comes from Project Umbrella member El Veltro. It's a question about our last week's discussion, which is, of course, Dark Side Chronicles. So, what does it say on the back of Steve Burnside's Western outfit in Resident Evil: The Dark Side Chronicles?
So not the Rockfort prison number.
No, not the no. Apparently, there's a Western outfit that he wears.
Is it a bonus costume?
Sorry?
Is it a bonus costume?
I think so. I don't.
Yeah, it is.
Fuck.
Terrific.
I'm not gonna know this.
Thanks,
I'm not even going to bother googling that.
Thanks, Paul, there for the confirmation. But it's I get sent these questions, so I'm pleased they're right. I never actually bothered checking them. There we go. So everyone put an answer. You can actually it is guessable. I'll say that.
Is it something to do with cowboys?
Oh, I just remember what it was.
Paul's just the fountain of knowledge, but it's guessable. Anyway, so moving on to question number 2, and it comes from Vito, and it's about Remake, so that's quite appropriate. What is the use of the wooden mount in Remake?
Fucking hell. He's gone from ridiculously hard to my fucking son would know that, and he's never even played Remake.
I think that's quite a simple one. I think everyone should get that one. Question number 3. Greek mythology has always been prevalent in Biohazard. Well, that's true. But which bioorganic weapon is named after the demon personification of death?
Excuse me?
Which BOW is named after the demon personification of death? Thank you, Wikipedia. So you've got a choice, haven't you? You think about which ones are named after, which BOW is named after Greek mythology. So I'll leave you to have a guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Everyone put something?
There used to be a game about dragons on the Amstrad CPC computer with the same name.
Oh, okay. Good. Question number 4. Which BOW ate Hassan?
Who?
Hassan?
Newsbot, do you know this one? Just say yes or no.
No.
Oh, this is from a file. So which BOW ate Hassan?
Is this from Survivor or something?
I couldn't possibly say. Right, question number 5. You may need to get your pens and paper out for this. And I do apologise. This is ridiculous. Give it your best go. How do you create V-Jolt?
Ah, fucking hell. Yeah.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to write down your answers.
Oh, God.
And then I'm going to score it. So no cheating. What's your
I'm not going to write that down. I'm just going to have to answer that.
That's all the questions. Everyone got an answer to everything?
Hang on, I'm just doing my V-Jolt formation.
Oh, fuck. No.
Great. Well, join us after this, or we'll run through the answers.
That was Roxanne by the police, or as they're now known, Sting. A song there about a prostitute. Doesn't say what her surname is. Must give her a call sometime. Although the effects of 23 years on the game would not render her pleasurable to mine eye. Alan's funny stories. Just time for one quick funny story before the news. On line 4 we have Roy from Bungie. Hello, Roy.
Hello.
Funny story, what is it?
After completing Resident Evil Revelations, I sold my Nintendo 3DS to a local paper, and then 6 months later, I received the very same one back as a birthday present from my brother-in-law, minus the power pack.
I see. So you the present you gave away, you then got back?
Yep, that's it. Goodbye.
What a funny story. Alan's funny stories. That was a funny story. I wonder who got the power pack. News.
And welcome back. So let's see how everyone has done. So question 1 was our question from El Veltro. What does it say on the back of Steve Burnside's Western outfit in Resident Evil Dark Side Chronicles? Let's start with Romby. What did you put?
I think it says X Monster.
Right, okay. GT?
What was question number 1 again?
It was, what does it say on the back of Steve Burns?
Oh, yeah, but I've no idea.
Okay.
Go Cowboys.
Go Cowboys. Batman?
YMCA.
Do you know the answer?
Yes, it's Axe Monster.
It is Axe Monster. Very good. Well done, Romby.
Yay.
Yay.
I only played Dark Side
that
Chronicles for the first time like a month ago.
Is Romby playing as the guest or as Mr. Spencer?
Both.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Well done, Romby. Right, question number 2 was from Vito. What's the use of the wooden mount in Remake? George?
It's quite a satisfying sound when you do it. You put it onto you light the fireplace and you put it onto the burning design of the second floor map, and you get it burnt onto the mount.
Okay. Batman?
Yeah, you put it above the fireplace and light the fire, and it burns the map onto the mount.
What map?
What?
What map?
Yeah.
You never asked. That wasn't the question.
Well, George specified. He may have taken this to whole new levels, my friend.
Map of the second floor.
And Romby?
The same thing. Block on the wall, light the fire, map of the second floor.
Correct. Well, the points for all round. I just thought I'd try and tease you out of a point. But very good, very good. Yeah, it was the map of the second floor. Thank you, Vito. Question 3 was Greek mythology has always been prevalent in Biohazard, but which BOW is named after the demon personification of death? George, you sounded fairly confident, so I'll come back to you. Batman?
Thanatos.
Atos. Romby?
Chimera.
Oh, so Greek. And GT?
I've always pronounced it Chimera, and I've always pronounced it Thanatos. Thanatos.
Oh, so you're going for Thanatos?
Thanatos, yeah. Now everyone says Chimera. I'm an idiot. I always used to call it Chimera. Like, chimney.
It's points to Batman and George Trevor there. Yes, it is Thanatos or Thanantos, whatever you want to call it. So well done. Wasn't Chimera, unfortunately. And I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what that is. Did you know that one, New Spot? I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
Right. Which BOW didn't eat Hanson, but ate Hassan instead? So all we're looking for is a BOW. Romby?
I really don't know. Crocodile, I don't know.
Batman?
I honestly don't have a clue. I can't even think who Hassan is.
Nothing? I'm not. Hazard a guess.
Christ. I don't know. Liquor.
Okay, right. And George?
I'm pissed off because I'm letting myself down because I'm pretty sure this guy he was talked about in a file in Revelations, and so it's one of the BOWs from Revelations.
Oh shit! Yeah, I remember that bastard.
I think which BOW it was. Oh fuck! Where's my?
Don't look.
Well, no, I'm just looking at some names for BOWs. It doesn't say which one killed Hassan. I just thought if I looked at them, it might jog my memory. Oh fuck! It's all in Japanese. Fuck! I don't know. I don't know which one did it. No idea.
What's your options at the moment?
Well,
Well, you said this is right, by the way, but go on.
No, because he was originally killed by the terrorists. El Veltro. I don't know. I can't think. No, I really don't know. Skag dead.
Skag dead, right, we've got there.
That's a complete guess.
And it's wrong. The answer is ooze. Quite simply ooze.
So half a point for getting the game.
You got the game. That's quite impressive. I think it's just the ooze, actually. Saying that, I actually didn't fucking check. All I did was found the file and then found out it confirmed it was on the Queen Zenobia. I could be wrong here. You could be owed a point. Newspot, do you know who it was?
Nope.
Just randomly found a file. It said, "Oh, my friend got eaten by a monster. Long live Hassan," whatever it says. And I checked it was on the Zenobia, so I assumed it was ooze. It could be wrong. Poor research by Neptune. Poor research. But you could be owed a point, so if you can correct me, you can. But I've got ooze. And finally, now this one may take some coordination. How do you create VJolt? We'll start with Batman for this one. Let me just write your name on a bit of paper.
Whose question was this?
Mine.
A brilliant question.
Batman, go on.
1 plus 3 equals 4.
Right.
4 plus 6 equals 10.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck. I can't even remember if there's a 2 or not.
George in the back.
No, I thought he was getting it right, and now he stumbled.
I can't remember. Shit. 3 plus 4 equals 7.
Right.
What have I got now? I can't remember.
You've said 1 plus 3 equals 4, 4 plus 6 equals 10, 3 plus 4 equals 7.
So that's 17. Fuck. It can't be right, is it? Because it equals 20. No, I can't remember. I've got it wrong.
Well, it depends on in terms of points. I'll see how everyone else does to see how many points you score, if any. Romby?
All right. I did this yesterday, so I'm going to try and remember it.
Okay, go on then.
Because I played it yesterday, so I
Super,
actually went and replayed it. I actually made the V-job. So 1 plus 3 equals 4. 4 plus 6 equals 10. 6 plus 1 equals 7. 7 plus 10 equals 17. 17 plus 3 equals 20.
Okay. And that's your 20. And GT?
Right. I only think I know this from the last few days of playing this. I wouldn't have known this answer to this 2 weeks ago. Get the water.
Oh, right. Okay.
Get 3. I'm trying to do it in my head. Get 3 and you make 4.
Right.
Right. You put that to one side. You then get the other one, the yellow 6.
Right.
And you make 10.
Right.
Right. So you put that to one side. You then get another bit of water. You go to the 6. You make 7. And you make 7. You combine the 7 with the 10 to make 17.
Right.
Put that to one side. You then get red. You then get the red 3. And you make V-Jolt. You add the 3 to the 17 to make 20, and that is V-Jolt.
Well, I mean, to be fair, that is I thought, a very difficult question. And Batman, I would have given you points, but considering the level of detail that we got from Romby and George Trevor there, that was superb, gentlemen. Correct for George and Romby. That was superb. Well done. That was excellent. Well done. But yeah, correct. It's number 3 plus water equals NP004.
So can I just ask, if you make, just going back to Remake, if Chris uses V-Jolt, it doesn't really have any effect on the battle, does it? Does anyone...
I think it weakens it. Well, I don't know about the remake because I haven't done it in the remake, but I remember in the original it weakens it.
Okay.
But it doesn't kill it.
Yeah, you put it on the roots, don't you?
Because with Jill, it doesn't actually kill it, but if you do it with Jill, then you effectively get the cutscene where Barry kills it for you.
I think it does the same. I think it does the same thing, but without Barry coming to save you, so you still end up having to fight it. I think it picks you up and drops you, and then you have to. But I can't remember because I'm also thinking that you can get Rebecca to go make it for you while you're being grabbed as Chris, and then she does it for you, and then it drops you, Chris, and then Chris finishes it off.
Oh, quite. Yeah, I forgot about the Rebecca bit. Yeah.
So just to confirm, it's 3, number 3 plus water equals NP004, and NP004 plus yellow 6 equals 10, yellow 6 plus water equals 7, number 7 plus number 10 equals VP017, VP017 plus number 3 equals V-Jolt. So
I'm glad you didn't take the names because I wouldn't have remembered the name. I remember the numbers, but...
I have to say, to be fair, George got a lot of the
names right. Yeah,
he's got a lot of the names.
I was going to say, it's quite sad how different my answer would have been a week ago. I wouldn't have had a clue really. I mean, I would have had a fair idea, but not the names.
I'm almost tempted to give George a bonus point for that.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
Wouldn't you?
On behalf of Mr. Spencer, I agree.
Oh, right.
There we go.
Newsbot, you've got the deciding
He's gonna hate me.
Should George have a bonus point for getting the and the colours and the...
Before you answer that, can I just say Gaydon is fucking shit?
Really? I thought it was okay. Yeah.
Well done, there we go. A bonus point for George. That concludes the quiz.
Before anyone gets too excited, I think we all know who's going to be winning this quiz. I think it's just a battle between me and Mr. Spencer for last.
Well, George, you can take solace because this is, my friend, your first victory. Scoring 4 out of 5. You've won.
Come on.
Episode 9. Get in there.
Come on.
So congratulations. That's George finishing top there with 4 points, followed by Romby / Mr. Spencer with an impressive 3, and Batman trailing last with 2 out of 5.
Very poor John.
Oh, dear.
Very poor Batman.
I think we should seriously consider his status as a PE staff member now.
Well, what's that done to the overall leaderboard, I hear you say? Well, the answer is this. Batman, you are still currently in the lead with 31.5 points. Mr. Spencer has now moved up to 26.5 points. George, you have moved up to 25 points.
It eludes me.
So only half a point behind. And Romby, obviously, you scored your 3, so that puts you joint second on the Star and a Reasoning Prize quiz. Joint with Welsh and Smiley. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
No worries. So, well, that was our quiz. Join us next time and we'll have some more questions and we'll see how everyone does. Well done, good game. I should stop saying that. That's awful, right? There we go. I thought I'd bung in some remake questions for this week. I know Mr. Spencer usually asks and complains that they're not about the podcasting question. So, at least we don't have any awkward arse moments to be talking about this week.
Well, actually, there is a nice shot of Jill when she's descending the ladder in Aqua Ring. Do you know the one I'm talking about? And like the water's dropping, and yeah.
After you empty the water out of the.
That's it. Yeah, and you're coming back down. Yeah, this guy knows.
He knows. Our next podcast is planned to be Resident Evil Code Veronica X, which should be exciting. Quite revolutionary in its time. It's obviously had the updated re-release. We're going to be dissecting the good points, the bad points, story implications, all our usual, to see what we will think of it. So we're going to be looking at Code Veronica, and then I think after that, then it's Resident Evil 5. By then, Damnation.
I was going to say, you might also have the PS3 RE6 demo out by the time you do the next one as well, so if it's any different than the 360 one.
Oh yeah, I forgot it's not on that, is it?
We've not done Resident Evil 3, have we?
No, not yet.
No, that's coming up.
I'm looking forward to that one.
Right, so at the moment it's Code Veronica. If anyone wants to call in with some MP3s like Vito does about Code Veronica, is it your favourite game? Are you pissed off that it got shifted from Dreamcast? All that malarkey. Either contact any of the staff members at PU and we'll happily play it. If you've got any other questions you'd like to go to the quiz to test our quizzes, then message me on Project Umbrella. They usually get picked because I'm running out of questions. I seriously am. So feel free to send me a PM and we can read them out for you on your behalf. You get your name mentioned. How exciting. On that note, it's goodbye from me, Neptune.
Goodbye from me, Batman.
Goodbye from me, George Trevor.
Goodbye from me, Newsbot.
Goodbye from me, Romby.